NBA front office insider Bobby Marks is with us once again. He's been a regular here lately. Bobby, who are three players that we should keep an eye on in Salt Lake City Summer League? Starting with a guy that Danny Ainge was determined to draft, who did show up after all.
That's Ace Bailey, the Rutgers forward, the 5th pick in the draft, and certainly we're going to have our eyes on Ace in Utah here. I think the interesting thing for me with Ace is, does Utah play him more at point guard here? Here's a player that averaged 2 turnovers last year at Rutgers, only 1.3 assists. And as you know, Hannah, Summer League is about experimenting. VJ Edgecombe is the next player, the 3rd overall pick in the draft. The 76ers guard is probably the most athletic player in this year's draft, 2.1 assists last year at Baylor. Another player who is going to probably experiment, a little bit upside. A tendency is probably to rely more about getting to the basket. We'll see as far as how his mid-range game is in Utah. And then the 3rd player here, America is going to get introduced to Nikola Topic, the 12th pick in the 2024 draft, courtesy of, guess what, the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? We haven't seen Topic in a year. He's been recovering from an ACL injury. I talked to one scout. They said if he was in this year's draft, he could potentially have been a top 5 pick.
Wow. And this is a guy that turns 20 in August. Just another addition to that young roster. Very interesting. All right, let's pivot, if we can, to the available veteran free agents. You've been on that all week long. What's the latest on where Chris Paul and Al Horford might land? And if you could start with CP3.
Yeah, it's funny. We just talked about the youth in the draft. Now we're talking to more about the seasoned veterans here in free agency. Certainly Chris Paul, the 40-year-old, 82 games last year, 82 starts. I would keep an eye on 2 teams here, Hannah. The Milwaukee Bucks, certainly with the loss of Damian Lillard, and his former team, the Phoenix Suns. 2 fits as far as where Chris Paul could eventually wind up. Al Horford is a little bit more interesting here. A team like Golden State, who lacks front court depth with Horford here, 39, has averaged at least 6 rebounds in every season here. A lot of what happens with Horford in Golden State is dependent on Jonathan Kuminga, the restricted free agent who still is unsigned. But hopefully by the end of next week, both those players will have a new home.
I love the idea of Horford with the Warriors. Yeah, that's really interesting way to round out that roster. Finally, you know, we're doing 50 states in 50 days, and we're in Missouri today. So what about the future of a St. Louis native? Let's talk about Bradley Beal, signed for 2 more years there in Phoenix. 2nd year as a player option, also has a no-trade clause. So what's the latest on his future with them?
Yeah, Bradley Beal owed $111 million over the next 2 years. Of course, Phoenix tried to move him at the deadline. That no-trade clause did become a hindrance here. Hannah, I think we're looking at a breakup between both Beal and the Phoenix Suns. And similar to what we saw with Damian Lillard, people are going to get used to that waiver and stretch provision here. If you look at it for Beal, a potential $20 million cap hit in Phoenix. Remember, this is a team that's been buried in the luxury tax, have been buried in the second apron. By reducing that Beal number, they get out of both of those numbers, could save them potentially $200 million.
Wow, and talk about a return on investment. If you look back at the last 6 seasons for Bradley Beal, he's never played more than 60 games. Bobby Marks, we appreciate it.
On ESPN. Philly will get their first look at 3rd overall pick VJ Edgecombe, a 2-way player that averaged 15 points per game and set a Baylor freshman record with 68 steals last season. Whether or not he wants to, Ace Bailey will be making his Summer League debut for the Jazz. Bailey averaged 18 points per game last season, which included a 39-point performance that tied the most points in a game by a Rutgers freshman. Jazz will also get their first look at 18th overall pick Walter Clayton Jr. The bucket-getting guard averaged 18 points per game last season en route to leading Florida to its first national title since 2007. To help get your mind right, NBA front office insider Bobby Marks joins us now. Bobby, Utah is going to get a lot of focus in Summer League, particularly because of Ace Bailey. What aspect of his game are the Jazz and he looking to improve upon this evening?
Well, I call him the master of the mid-range, but that also is his Achilles here. And I think when you look at the overall body of work of Ace Bailey and what we could expect in Utah, here's 3 things that I'm looking forward for him to do. the ability to get to the rim and finish with contact. Shot less than 50% of his layups as far as getting to the rim. What does Utah do with him as a playmaker here? Roughly over 1.3 assists per game, 2 turnovers per game at Rutgers, and then a shot creator. He has the canny of making the tough shots, but also taking the tough shots here. So Summer League is a little bit of a trial and error, but certainly the ability to become a playmaker during these couple games in Utah is something I'm going to keep an eye on.
This is the time I imagine that they want him to make the mistakes if necessary. Now, today could also feature someone that you're saying is, quote, probably the best athlete in this year's draft, and it's not Cooper Flagg. Who could that possibly be, Bobby?
Well, it's Sixers VJ Edgecombe, and I think what you saw last year at Baylor, the ability to play defense, roughly 2.1 steals per game at Baylor last year. He's ready to come and play NBA minutes right now. Now it's offensively that I'm going to keep an eye on over these next couple games, and certainly during the Las Vegas Summer League. Shot roughly 33% on his pull-up jumpers last year. Like Bailey, had trouble finishing at the rim, 49% field goal here, but certainly defensively, he's as good as it gets as a player coming out of this year's draft.
Again, you can see VJ in action this evening, 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, Summer League action in Salt Lake City. Now, LeBron James is well beyond his Summer League days, Bobby, but still finds himself at the forefront of the news cycle regarding his future in L.A. How realistic is it that the Lakers can go out and get more help for both him and Luka?
Well, over the last week, they've added Jake LaRavia, DeAndre Ayton, and yesterday Jackson Hayes. And if we're going to do a little bit of napkin math right now, the LaRavia and DeAndre Ayton signings has hard capped the Lakers at the first apron. They're roughly $3.3 million below. So that doesn't really get you much in free agency. The likelihood is that they're going to sign second-round pick Ado Thero. If they want to create more room, they're going to have to waive a player like Shake Milton. His $3 million contract becomes guaranteed on July 15th. That would give them the ability to go out and sign another player, potentially to the veteran minimum exception. They do have those expiring contracts if they want to be a player out in the trade market. Gabe Vincent, Rui Hachimura, Maxi Kleber, nearly $40 million in expiring contracts.
The Lakers trying to make some money moves, trying to figure out exactly which timeline to play on, either present or future, fresh off that first-round exit.
In Manhattan, the Knicks, fresh off their first Eastern Conference Finals berth in a quarter century. The story of this offseason has been the absentee on the bench. They finally did find a head coach in Mike Brown. So what is the state of the Knicks now?
Well, it's NBA Finals or bust here. Certainly when you go to an Eastern Conference Finals this past year, and then you go fire your head coach in Tom Thibodeau, I think where you look at them in the Eastern Conference, they're like the last man standing, them in Cleveland, with all these teams with injuries in Indiana and Milwaukee and Boston. Certainly you return your starting five, including Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. You have your 2 top bench players, Mitchell Robinson and Deuce McBride. And then, as you mentioned, you go out and get Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele to strengthen your bench, and of course the addition of Mike Brown. So if you're in New York, getting to an NBA Finals is the end goal, right? It's not Eastern Conference Finals, it's getting to an NBA Finals.